Hello, welcome to this DCS F14B tutorial. In this video, I will be talking about the Beyond Visual Range radar and manipulation of it through Jester in the pilot seat. So to begin, get ourselves into air-to-air mode and make sure that we set our HSD display mode down from nav to TID. What that does is on this bottom display, it shows us
11 o'clock.
Jester's radar display. If we put it to the up position, it's our nav display. So I'll put that back down. TID. And let's talk about some symbology on here. Trim myself out. Alright, so on here, we can see the where the radar is scanning. So it's this cone out in front of us. Each one of these increments on the cone symbolizes 20 miles. So here's 20, here's 40, here's 60, here's 80, and here's 100 miles, for easy reference of targets inside the radar. Here symbolizes a radar contact. You can see a couple of them off to the side there. This represents the upper limit of the vertical scan of the radar, so it's scanning up to 46,000 feet. This bottom number is the lower limit, so it's scanning ground level at the lower limit. And in the center is the angle of the radar. So right now it's just pointing directly out the front of our plane. If it was a negative number, it would be below our plane, and if it was a positive number, it would be angled above our plane. Here's just some coordinates, north and east. That's good for now. Let's go try and find a target. So I'll fly out towards some fighters for an example. And for this example, since it's BVR, beyond visual range, I'll be utilizing the Phoenixes, so I'll hit my keybind to select them. It toggles between Sparrow and Phoenix. I'll talk more about this in a weapons tutorial. So right now I have my Phoenixes selected, and what I'm going to do is open my Jester menu, go to the main menu, select Beyond Visual Range, Radar Settings, and Track While Scan Auto. Track while scan is going to allow us to engage multiple targets at once, which is what we want to do with our Fox 3 missiles, the Phoenixes. And auto will give Jester more control over how he's locking targets. If we wish to give finer tune control to Jester, we could go into the menu. I'll go to the BVR menu. And here we can see two options that are pretty important. We see Scan Azimuth, we'll cover that first. So in Scan Azimuth, we have left, left center, center, right center, right. And what this does is it tells Jester where to point this cone for the radar. So center would be where it is now. Right center would be over here, right would be over here, and the same for left. So let's try that. Let's tell him to scan right. He'll say Roger, and now he moved to scan to the right of us. So if he's ever doing something you don't want him to do, you can go into the Scan Azimuth and choose your option. So here I'll choose center. Here we can see when we scanned right, it showed us an unknown contact, this upside down U, and an arrow. So this arrow is the direction of travel of the contact. Talk about it up here. So here we have, oh, it went away. I'll point it out once we get it back. So I'll just keep flying out towards them. I'll pause it here, actually. So in addition to the Scan Azimuth, we have Scan Elevation. So we have two options, up or down. So we can either just tell him flat out to scan more, scan higher or scan lower, or we can tell him with scan altitude at distance. At a certain distance, say 40 miles, we want him to scan at this elevation. I'll leave that go for now. Alrighty, so let's talk about this. So now we have a contact locked in TWS, signified by this flashing, and also by this vertical symbol here. So this lets us know that we have the ability to fire. The hot trig light is also lit up. With our locked target, we see the 1 on the right-hand side, that's the first priority target. So that's telling us if we fire a missile, it will fire at him. If we have multiples, it'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on the right, and that'll be the order we fire on them. Up here, this RA is the distance from us, so 77.3 miles. And on the right is the altitude of the target, so in this case, 20,000 feet. Here we have the solid line. If we had the solid line showing which direction of travel it's flying, if we saw the solid line with a thicker rectangle inwards of it a little bit, that would be our ranging cue. So that would tell us, here's that thicker rectangle. So we need to wait for the line to go past this thicker rectangle. You need to see that, rewind the video and pause it. But if our line extends past that thick rectangle, it means we should wait to fire. And if we are within that rectangle or closer to the target with the line, that means that we have an acceptable firing solution according to the plane. So here we see that rectangle again, our first priority target. And since the line is not extending past the rectangle, we should theoretically have an acceptable launch parameter. But that comes down to your pilot intuition, your altitude, and your speed. So right now with my current parameters, speed and altitude, I would not fire on that target 60 some miles away. As far as other things, we already covered azimuth and elevation. You can tell gesture to go into track while scan manual. And right now we don't have, okay, there we go, we got a lock. And sometimes when you are in here, you get an option to change which target. So if you had multiple targets, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., you could tell them which target you actually want to prioritize rather than the one. You could say fire on 2. Here is that line extending past the rectangle I talked about. So we'd wait for that line to go into and past the rectangle. Now we have a fire solution. So you can experiment with these radar modes. Generally, I'll just stick in track while scan auto and then tell him azimuth or elevation depending on need. In addition, in the radar settings page, we can tell him to go to change the target aspect. So if they're coming towards us, going sideways, or if they're going away from us. And also the target size, whether it's normal radar cross-section, large or small. Usually I'll just leave this on normal. And I'll leave the aspect how it is. Makes no difference. The ground stabilize will change your radar display from plane view. We have ourselves as a reference to the ground as a reference, so we can see it like that, where north is up. And we can change it back to aircraft. As far as the ground stabilize, we can tell it for a period of time or indefinitely. I just stick with aircraft stabilized. It's perfectly fine there. Nothing more to note as far as your BVR radar. Generally, you just want to stay in TWS, that's what I'm covering. Range wall search can be used for engaging a single target rather than multiples. But that's generally a within visual range thing, which will be covered in the next tutorial. Go silent means turn off your radar so it stops emitting. TID range will change the range scale of this bottom display. So right now it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 100. I could tell him to change it to 400 miles, for example. And you can see it extends it quite a bit. I'm going to get out of here. I'll be covering weapons in not the next tutorial, which will be within visual range, but the tutorial after that. I will tell him to put the TID back to normal. So we'll go auto. And we can see a whole bunch of stuff popping up on there. We can also tell Jester to break the lock that he currently has using our break lock keybind covered in the controls section. And if you really want, you can tell him to attempt a single target track using the lock enemy ahead STT keybind. Oh, no, we also covered in the tutorials for keybinds. If you try it and he can't, he'll just yell at you unable. Just like that. So right here he has a lock. I'll tell him break lock. And then the lock will go away. That's all for that. Hopefully that helps with BVR radar symbologies and terminologies. We'll go into this a bit more during the Phoenix Weapons tutorial. Thanks for watching.